Hello, everyone, and welcome to Working In with Heights, potentially the only series dedicated to exercising your brain as well as your body. So, we believe a healthy brain is the key to a healthy, happy life. So, we created this idea of a cranium gymnasium to help people take the time to nourish their brains as well as their bodies. Heights is all about brain health and mental wellness. We make smart, sustainable supplements that combine the essential oils and nutrients your body and your brain need, and we deliver them to your doorstep every month. And then we create clever content in collaboration with leading experts like tonight to help you optimize your brain health and performance too, so you can reach your heights, whatever they might be. That's all from me. Time to introduce today's mental fitness instructor, Rhiannon Lambert. So firstly, welcome, Rhi.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm a registered nutritionist. I have a first-class degree in nutrition and health, a master's degree in obesity risks and prevention, and I'm a master practitioner. We're working with eating disorders and different relationships with food, so disordered eating behaviors. It tends to flow, the kind of work I do as a registered nutritionist, as I am bound by a code of conduct and ethics. So I am governing body bound, meaning everything I say will be grounded in science. And I'm extremely passionate about making science, especially nutrition, evidence-based nutrition, accessible to many people, which is where my platforms, Readdressing on social media, came from, my books, Renourish. And I kind of have a very different journey into nutrition. I used to be a singer, I'm now a nutritionist. And my philosophy is pretty much building healthy relationships with food, because everybody has a story and journey, which we'll discuss today. And it's something on my podcast, Food for Thought, which I host. We discuss a lot of different science topics. I'm very lucky I get to interview, like yourself, you get to interview lots of really cool, amazing, intelligent guests, and you kind of learn so much every time. So a little bit about me, I guess I'm passionate about those things, and I have a multitude of books and platforms and social media stuff going on alongside my clinic, where I run a team of health professionals, and we work on many different aspects: sports nutrition, gut health, intuitive eating, eating disorders, pre and postnatal, weight management, you name it, we've got someone in the clinic that can help.
The first question I've got for you is, what has stress actually got to do with food?
Well, I think a lot of people put stress in the same bracket of food together, whereas actually the reason we get stressed is often it can be related to food, and it can be a very different issue ultimately. And then the action we take when we're stressed can involve food. So food can be a coping mechanism for many people when they get stressed. Stress can also play a role with the food choices that we then make, because we have learned behaviors in life that when things are tough, or when things get stressful, that we soothe ourselves with those coping strategies and those different types of foods. And then, of course, if we're looking at how stress affects our life on a whole, if it impacts our sleep, we then impact our sleep hormones, which can spike your appetite the next day if you don't get enough sleep. It's like a vicious cycle. I would say stress and food are so heavily intertwined. But more than that, it's very much psychology and nutrition that work together, because how everybody perceives stress, if you were looking at a rate of perceived stressful events, so I think house moves are up there with the top ones, divorce is up there in stressful events in your life. Everybody will cope with those events differently, yet they're all perceived stressful. So it's how we as individuals perceive stress, and then what we do and what we're used to in our life to act upon it.
What is technically going on inside our brains then when we're sort of getting into this stress food cycle?
I'm not a neurologist, I'm a nutritionist, but just got to put that out there. But I do know there's a very strong interaction between the gut and the brain. And that's where nutrition really plays such a heavy role. We've got something called a gut-brain axis, which people think it's your mind telling your body what to do. No, it's your gut that sends the signals to your brain, and that results in the hunger or satiety feeling. Ghrelin or leptin are the two hunger hormones. But if we're looking at stress in particular, and something called cortisol, which is a stress hormone that's released, it kind of goes back to The olden days is a good analogy of looking at it. If you're running away from a lion in the Sahara, let's use the Sahara or the jungle. I like those two analogies much better. You would secrete cortisol, the stress hormone, which enables your body to react quickly to situations. It's survival. So actually, stress isn't always bad. People perceive it as this evil, bad thing that just has a negative impact on your body. The problem is we're spiking it for unnecessary reasons in society every single day. You could just be late for work and you're spiking that stress response. That in turn can impact your appetite. It can either prevent you from getting hungry, or other people, it's so interesting because it's so unique, it can cause them to get hungrier. And we know everybody's got a different gut microbiota, which is the bacteria that lives within our guts that has different reactions that can play a role in this, but also play a role in our digestive function every day, our happy hormone production. So 70 to 90% of our serotonin, which is the happy hormone. So if you think serotonin, if I mention that word on this podcast, on this video, everything, it's happy. Serotonin is happy stuff. That's what we want. And it's made in the gut predominantly. And then the next bit is what you get from food. So technically, if you're not looking after down here and you're getting stressed, and this fight or flight response is also causing blood to be drawn away from the stomach elsewhere in the body, you're not going to be breaking down your food very well either. And lots of people experience IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, when they're stressed. Food and stress are pretty much heavily linked. So the answer to your question with the brain would be the hormones that we create. There's a big interaction going on. Imagine an invisible line from my stomach all the way up to my head. That's constantly talking. And the food we eat influence those messaging signals.
So why don't we seem to want to binge salads?
Because the things that set off that feel-good reaction come from fats. So the brain is 60% fat. We need to eat the right types of fats. And then, of course, sugar. Now, there's a lot of confusion with sugar in the brain, which I will go into in this recording. But if you combine fat and sugar together, it's the ultimate genius palatable equation in food science. Think of a cake. Everybody loves cake. Or, well, most people, I'm going to say, or something sweet, maybe pastry with honey, something that involves those two factors, fat and glucose, sugars, carbs. They are satiating. We feel very full and satisfied when we have those two items together, which is why you're more likely to binge on those. It isn't a direct emotional response. It does have a pathway that mimics an addiction pathway, but it's not an addiction. It does signal a feel-good factor. We do rewards light up in the brain, but it's not quite an addiction.
Yeah, so basically like spiking the dopamine release, cheating it almost.
Well, dopamine is a very interesting one. The pathway isn't exact, but if you eat a lot of a certain amino acid called tyrosine, which is found in protein-rich foods as well, that does play a role with the pathway to dopamine, just as carbohydrates play a pathway to serotonin. So the happy hormone and the feel good. You've got happy, feel good, foods you eat go to dopamine or serotonin pretty much, but it's not always that direct. A lot of it can be about the palatable flavor on the tongue, just as much as the mechanism in the brain, and it's learned behavior again. I guess if you grew up with broccoli being a reward in society and you cooked it with lots of butter and sugar, I know that sounds disgusting, but I wonder if that would have the same reaction.
What really is it about unhealthy food and us gravitating towards it for binging? Is it a totally natural thing, or is it entirely cultural depending on how and where we were brought up?
Obviously, there's socioeconomic groups, there's culture that you've mentioned there, cultural differences. But ultimately, when it comes to things that we choose, is it the nature-nurture debate? I remember doing this at university many, many years ago in anthropology and evolution, and we were looking at how we're adapted to like sweet things. So the example was used of honey on a tree. Our ancestors would have to physically climb that tree, get stung multiple times by bees to get a bit of honey just to satisfy that craving, which they did. But today, the problem is food is everywhere and abundant. So our environment is very, very different. So it depends what environment you're in and what marketing you're exposed to. Again, what childhood things, was there always a treat drawer in the cupboard that always had the same biscuits in it every Friday? And therefore, are those biscuits the things that you now always go to every Friday? Is that how you were brought up? Is the local takeaway available 24/7? I mean, there never used to be food available 24/7. So it's a huge, and this is why we have a problem at the moment in the UK with how to manage obesity strategies, for instance, because it is so unique and environmentally dependent, just as much as the food industry, just as much as parenting, as culture. It's huge.
So how do you think we can be our first, line of defense, if you will, and stop ourselves from actually binge eating when feeling stressed? Is there a proven strategy, or is this one of those open debates?
It's really open, but something we work on in my Readdressing clinic a lot is coping strategies. First of all, identify why. And this is hard. It takes working on yourself to work on binge eating. Of course, a binge, let's start with that, looks different to everyone. So a binge to you might be, oh, I had 3 portions of dessert. A binge to someone else could be, I bought a whole aisle on the supermarket. Someone else, it could just be, I had a normal portion size, but in my head, that is a binge. So that's, first of all, important to identify. Do you have a disordered relationship with food, or is a binge something that just occasionally happens when you are a bit overwhelmed, and that is your coping mechanism? So it's acknowledging the food rules that you have inside your head. Lots and lots of us have inbuilt rules that we shouldn't eat after 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or we should be fasting at this time because so-and-so that's a film star does that and it works for them. I've read that red meat's really bad for me and I can't drink wine, and chocolate was good, now it's bad, but now it's good again. So we have all these rules that when we break them, it can trigger a vicious cycle. And I write about this in my book, Renourish. We've got the guilt complex that kicks in, which leads to feeling of shame, which leads to you then overcompensating with the one thing you know how to do, which is to eat more food. And then you feel guilty again about that mechanism. It's such a cycle. And you can break it by stopping and saying, what am I actually feeling right now? And this is really difficult, by the way. It sounds very simple when I'm saying it. It takes a lot of practice. Take a big breath and breathe. Just relax your body, tap into your parasympathetic nervous system rather than reacting really acutely with sympathetic. If you can, breathing really helps. It helps you think coherently. And then think, what can I do right now that's going to help soothe that emotion rather than turn to food? And if it's still a bit of food, that's okay. But maybe you can break that halfway through and say, I will have that, but I'm going to go run a bath as well, or I'm going to go out for a walk. As you can see, it's very complex because every case is so unique. But what I'm trying to say is, if this is you listening and you need help, it is definitely there and something you should be working on with a psychologist and a nutritionist, ideally.
And I guess that's why they call it nutritional therapy.
That's what they do. Exactly. It's nutritional therapy is extremely important because it's unique to you and you've got to figure out what works for you. So what someone's written down is never going to be the answer for everybody.
What are your top 3 tips around stress and binge eating?
I think the first one would be try and eat mindfully. So try and slow down the process, remove distractions, the TV, classic, watching YouTube, having your phone on when you're eating, because when you're not looking directly at the food, the hunger signals aren't doing their job effectively. So let's pretend my mug is an apple. I use an apple as an example. I wish I had one to hand. I should have got one for this talk. So pretend this is an apple. When I'm looking at this, the enzymes in my mouth are already getting ready to break down an apple. The brain is very clever. I haven't even processed this yet. My body knows an apple's coming. The stomach's then ready. Then the digestive process can kick in. The small intestine absorbs everything. The large intestine, the gut bacteria at the bottom near the colon gets ready to digest some of that food. A tenth of what we eat today is eaten by the bacteria. Whereas if I'm not looking directly at that apple and I'm just putting it in my mouth whilst I'm watching something else, that process is disrupted. And that's when a lot of people also experience bloating and discomfort. And it's very easy to eat more than you realize because you're not acknowledging it. So that tip number 1, eat mindfully. And if anyone's still a bit confused by my quick explanation, Renourish, my book, A Simple Way to Eat Well, has a whole section on mindful eating. The second tip would be, is it a feeling or a fact? And that's something I work on a lot with my clients. We sit down and they'll tell me, oh, I felt really terrible today. I had a huge argument at work and, I feel pretty worthless. And I'll question them, well, is that a fact that you are worthless? Let's have a think about it. Why do you think you feel that way? And then breaking down that, is it a feeling versus fact, can help with the mechanism that's about to come. And then the final tip would probably be, Allow yourself enjoyed items in moderation, because research does suggest if you restrict completely and you follow crash diets and you try and eliminate everything, you are way more likely to overeat on the item you don't allow yourself to have. So if your vice is granola, make sure you have granola twice a week for breakfast instead of binging on a whole packet because you haven't allowed yourself to have it.
I think everyone listening is like, I wish my vice was granola.
I don't know why that came in my head.
No, it's good. It's good to pretend that would be people's vices. That's better. Let's just keep it that way.